The kitchen smelled of coffee and melted butter, but the air between Marta and Maksym crackled with heat. She sat on the edge of the kitchen table, her legs wrapped around his hips, her dress bunched up at her waist. His hands gripped her sides roughly, fingers digging into her skin, his lips tracing hot trails along her neck, leaving faint bruises. The table groaned under their weight, but Marta barely noticed. She was lost in the moment, her nails clawing at his back, leaving red streaks across his shoulders. Her breaths came in sharp gasps, mingling with his low growls as their bodies moved in a frantic rhythm. She arched into him, her thighs tightening, urging him closer, deeper, her moans bouncing off the walls. The dim light above cast shadows, and in that chaotic blur of sweat and skin, she felt alive, desired, consumed. But then his phone buzzed, a sharp vibration cutting through the haze. It lay on the table's edge, next to scattered forks and a half-empty wine glass. Marta's eyes flicked to it instinctively, and her heart stopped. A message from V. I miss you, kitten. 3 words that sliced through her like a blade. Her body froze, the heat draining as if someone had doused her with ice. Maksym felt her tense but didn't stop right away. His hands still gripped her thighs, his lips brushing her collarbone. What's that? Her voice trembled, but a steel edge crept into it. She shoved him back, sitting up, and grabbed the phone before he could react. The screen still glowed, the words, I miss you, kitten, searing into her eyes. Maksym yanked the phone from her hands, his face twisting with panic. It's just work, Marta, don't make shit up, he muttered, but his voice cracked, and his fingers fumbled as he shoved the phone into the pocket of his jeans, crumpled on the floor. His eyes darted anywhere but at her, his face gray as ash. Marta slid off the table, her legs unsteady, not from passion, but from the blow she hadn't seen coming. Her chest tightened, like someone was squeezing her lungs. Work? At 10 p.m.? Calling you kitten? Her words were quiet, each one falling like a stone. Maksym backed up a step, his lips curling into a weak smile. You're not buying into some nonsense, are you? It's just a colleague messing around, he said, but his tone was too rushed, too fake. She stared at him, his tousled hair, the scratches on his neck from her nails, and felt disgust, not at him, but at herself. Moments ago, they'd been so close, their bodies entwined, and now a chasm yawned between them. She remembered how he'd come home late lately, how he dodged her questions, how his clothes carried a sweet, sharp perfume, not hers. Who is she? She asked, her voice colder now. Maksym spread his hands, like she was accusing him of stealing a cookie. Nobody. You're spinning yourself up, Marta. Let's not ruin the night. But the night was already ruined. She felt something new rising in her, not pain, but anger, swelling with every lie he spat. She saw him fidget, adjusting his belt, his gaze flitting between her and the door like a trapped animal. You're lying, she said, not a question. Maksym stepped forward, his hand reaching for her shoulder, but she flinched as if he were venomous. Don't touch me. Her voice cut through the kitchen's silence, and he froze. Marta turned to the table, where their wine glasses still sat, her dress still crumpled. Her skin burned from his touch, but now those touches felt alien, tainted. She knew she couldn't just brush off that message. Kitten. The word looped in her mind like a stuck record. She remembered how he used to call her that, early in their marriage, when they couldn't keep their hands off each other. But these past months, he'd barely called her anything, just Marta, flat, like a coworker. She looked up at him, and there were no tears in her eyes, only cold determination. Tell the truth, Maksym. Now. Her voice was even, but it carried an ultimatum. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His silence screamed louder than words. She nodded, as if confirming something to herself. Fine. I'll find out on my own. She turned and walked to the bedroom, leaving him standing in the kitchen, where the air still smelled of their passion, now poisoned by deceit. But her steps held no weakness, each one was a promise that she'd unearth the truth, no matter how painful. Marta lay in bed, clutching the sheets so tightly her nails bit into her palms. The clock on the nightstand read 3:47 a.m., but sleep wouldn't come. Her mind churned with one word, kitten. It burned like acid, and every time she closed her eyes, she saw that brief text on Maksym's phone screen. She tried to convince herself it could be innocent, a joke, a mistake, anything, but his reaction told another story. The way he'd snatched the phone, his trembling voice, his eyes darting like a cornered animal's. It wasn't nothing. It was a lie, and she tasted its bitterness, sharp and sticky. She turned her head to Maksym, asleep beside her. His chest rose and fell evenly, one hand sprawled on her pillow, as if he still had a claim to her closeness. She remembered hours ago, in the kitchen, how his hands had gripped her hips, shoving her against the table with a force that rattled the dishes. She'd felt desired then, alive. Her fingers had tangled in his hair, her teeth grazed his neck, leaving marks, and he'd responded with a roughness that bordered on fury, like he was proving something. Their bodies had collided, sweat mingling, her moans filling the air. But now, staring at him, she felt only revulsion. Was he thinking of that, when he was with her? Did he call her the same? Marta slipped out of bed, her bare feet touching the cold floor. She padded to the kitchen, where the scent of their dinner, spaghetti with tomato sauce and unfinished wine, still lingered. The table stood unchanged, but she saw it differently now, a place where her world had cracked open. She ran her hand along its wooden surface, feeling a heaviness settle in her chest. She recalled how Maksym had changed lately. He no longer left his phone lying around, as he used to. His late meetings had become weekly, and he always came home smelling of cigarettes, though he'd quit years ago. She'd noticed how he avoided her gaze when she asked about his day, how his jokes felt forced, his touches mechanical. She sat at the table, pressing her temples. Her thoughts sparked and jumped. Was she overreacting? Could it really be a colleague, as he'd claimed? But why the panic? She remembered catching him in the shower with his phone a month ago. He'd quickly hidden the screen, mumbling about a work chat. She'd brushed it off then, but now it looked different. She knew she couldn't just wait for him to confess. Maksym was never the type to admit fault. He'd twist things, make her feel like she was dramatizing. Marta stood and approached his jacket, hanging in the hall. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to breathe. She checked the pockets, keys, wallet, gum. Nothing odd. But in a side pocket, her fingers brushed something soft. She pulled out a handkerchief, pink, scented with a sweet perfume, not hers. Her stomach twisted, but she inhaled deeply. It wasn't proof, but it was a sign. She hid it in the dish drawer, where Maksym never looked, and returned to the bedroom. She lay beside him, careful not to touch. His warmth, once comforting, now grated. She recalled last week, when he'd come home late and they'd ended up in bed. That sex was different, quick, almost predatory. He hadn't met her eyes, his hands tense, like he was fulfilling a duty. She'd thought he was just tired, but now she saw it clearly. Was he with her, or imagining someone else? Her fingers tightened on the sheet. She couldn't forgive herself for missing it, his distance, his lies, his foreign scent. Maksym stirred in his sleep, mumbling something incoherent. Her heart skipped. Had he said a name? But he only rolled over, and she exhaled. She knew accusing him without proof would backfire. He'd deny everything, turn it on her, call her paranoid. No, she had to be smarter. She decided to check his things, his phone, his life. But she knew digging into his secrets might crush her. Therefore, she vowed to act quietly, methodically, until she had enough to shatter his lies. She closed her eyes, not to sleep, but to plan, her mind already weaving a net with no room for weakness. Marta woke with a heavy head, as if she'd been drinking all night, though she hadn't touched alcohol. Sunlight barely pierced the curtains, but Maksym was gone, slipped out earlier than usual, leaving only his cologne's faint trace on the pillow. She rose, feeling last night's anger settle in her like a stone. Her fingers still recalled the texture of that pink handkerchief, now hidden in the kitchen drawer. Today, she couldn't just wait, she needed answers. The kitchen greeted her with silence. She brewed coffee but didn't drink, clutching the hot mug until her palms stung. Her gaze drifted to the table, where yesterday she and Maksym had been so close. She remembered his hands gripping her waist, his lips biting her neck, his hips shoving her with a force that made the table shudder. Her body had burned, arching into him, nails tearing at his skin, thinking it was passion. Now the memory was poisoned. Was he sincere, or picturing that as he whispered her name? She pushed the mug aside and went to the hall. Maksym had taken his jacket but left his worn work backpack. Her pulse quickened, but she steadied her breath. Unzipping it, she checked the pockets, pens, a charger, a crumpled napkin. But in a side compartment, her fingers found something hard. She pulled out a small box, a silver bracelet engraved with Vira. Her stomach lurched. It wasn't her name. She never wore bracelets. Maksym knew she didn't like them. Marta sank to the floor, holding the box like it might explode. She recalled 2 weeks ago, when he'd come home late, reeking of wine and something sweet. That night, he'd been relentless. He'd walked into the bedroom, shed his clothes, and pulled her to him without a word. His hands were harsh, almost cruel, shoving her onto the bed. She'd matched him, fingers tugging his hair, teeth grazing his shoulder, thinking he was making up for months of distance. Now she saw it differently. He wasn't apologizing. He was using her, maybe to quiet guilt, maybe to imagine another. She stood, legs trembling, but refused to crumble. She hid the bracelet in the dish drawer beside the handkerchief and opened Maksym's laptop, left on the couch. He never shut it down, assuming she didn't care about his work. She launched the browser and froze. A tab showed a city center hotel, a booking in his name with a note, for two. She clicked his email, but the password failed. He'd changed it. They'd shared all passwords before, a trust now broken. Marta felt fury rising but forced herself to think coldly. She jotted down the hotel's name and date, then searched its contact. Her fingers buzzed with adrenaline as she dialed. "Good morning, I'm confirming a booking for Maksym Koval," she said, feigning confidence. The clerk replied, "Yes, a deluxe suite for Mr. Koval and Ms. Vira." "Any changes?" Marta barely kept her voice steady. "No, thank you." She hung up, heart pounding in her throat. Back in the kitchen, coffee scent lingering, her eyes fell on a knife by the sink. For a moment, she pictured grabbing it, storming that hotel, making Maksym and Vira feel her pain. But she dismissed the thought. No, she wouldn't scream or cry. She'd be smarter. She opened her laptop and created a file, logging her first evidence: handkerchief, bracelet, booking. It was her first act of revenge, silent but precise. She knew each truth she uncovered would build a wall to crush his lies. But she understood prying into his secrets might shatter her. Therefore, she resolved to act like a hunter, gathering proof until she was ready to strike. Marta sat at the kitchen table, clutching a cold cup of tea. Her eyes burned from sleepless nights, but no tears came, only a cold clarity. The bracelet and hotel call had changed her view of Maksym. Every gesture, every word felt like part of a game he played behind her back. But she hid it, cooking him breakfast, smiling as he kissed her cheek before leaving, while inside, she scanned him like a lie detector, hunting for cracks in his mask. That evening, Maksym came home early with a bottle of wine and a wide grin. "Let's have some romance," he said, his voice too sweet, like he was trying to soothe her. Marta nodded, but her stomach twisted. She knew this wasn't about her, it was his way of covering tracks. They sat on the couch, music playing, and soon his hands were on her. She didn't resist, though his touch felt foreign. He pushed her back, lips searing her neck, hands roughly tugging her blouse. She responded, not from desire, but calculation. Her fingers slid along his back, but she sought truth, sense, marks, anything. His movements were hurried, almost mechanical, like a ritual. She bit his ear, but her eyes tracked his phone on the table. He hadn't turned it off, as usual. When he collapsed, breathing hard, Marta rose, pulling on his shirt. "Getting water," she said, but instead approached the phone. Its screen lit at her touch, no password, maybe from the wine's haze. She opened messages and saw a chat with V, "Tomorrow at the bar, don't forget." Sent an hour ago. Her fingers shook, but she snapped a screenshot and sent it to herself before setting the phone down. Maksym sprawled on the couch, oblivious that she'd just torn another piece of his lie. Next day, she noticed he no longer left his phone unattended. He took it to the bathroom, confirming her suspicions. But she found another clue, in the kitchen trash, a torn bar receipt for $20 in cocktails, dated last Saturday, when he'd stayed late at the office. Marta didn't drink cocktails, and Maksym despised bars, calling them pretentious. She called the bar, posing as his assistant, and learned he'd paid for 2 martinis with their joint account card. Her money, again. Fury surged, but she held back. No scene, not yet. She opened their banking app and spotted another transaction, $50 to an unknown number, labeled services. She photographed the statement, adding it to her file with the handkerchief, bracelet, and screenshot. This was her second act of revenge, quiet but sharp. She pictured Maksym and Vira laughing over drinks bought with her money, vowing they'd pay for every drop. That night, Maksym tried reconnecting. He lit candles, pulled her to the bedroom, and she went along. His hands pinned her wrists, breath hot as he whispered her name. She matched him, nails grazing his chest, but felt no warmth, only his deceit. Her movements were deliberate, eyes noting his glance at the phone, checking it was safe. It only fueled her. She recalled yesterday's couch, how she'd played his game while stealing his secrets. Now, each touch was a test, each kiss a trap. She knew confronting him would let him slip away. Therefore, she decided to dig deeper, track his every step, collecting proof to make his escape impossible. Marta sat at the living room table, flipping through a book, but her eyes didn't see the words. She waited for Maksym, who'd promised to be home early, but the clock struck 10 p.m. Her mind buzzed with thoughts of the bar receipt, the screenshot, the $50 transfer. Each new lie was a knife, but she refused to bleed. She knew Maksym felt her suspicions. He'd grown cautious, his smiles too wide, his touches too insistent. When the door finally opened, he walked in, carrying the scent of cold air and that sweet perfume she recognized from the handkerchief. "Sorry, got held up," he said, tossing keys onto the shelf. Marta nodded, eyes down. "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice tight, like he was testing her. She flashed a smile, sharp as glass. "Of course," she said, and he relaxed, thinking she hadn't noticed. He approached, hands sliding onto her shoulders, and soon she was pressed against the wall. His lips crashed into hers, rough and urgent, as if to erase her doubts. She didn't push back, though every touch screamed betrayal. His hands gripped her wrists, shoving her to the couch, tearing at her clothes. She responded, nails raking his shoulders, but it wasn't passion, she was playing. Her fingers sought clues, scents, marks, while her eyes watched his phone on the table. He was tense, gaze flickering, and she knew he wasn't fully there. The sex was brief, mechanical, and when he slumped back, panting, she felt only his lies. She rose, pulling on his shirt, and headed to the kitchen, supposedly for water. Her real target was his phone, left unguarded. She unlocked it, but he'd set a password this time. Her heart raced, but she stayed calm. Knowing his habits, she tried their wedding date. It worked. In the chat with V, a new message, "With her again? Don't make me wait." Sent 20 minutes ago, while he was driving. Marta's hands trembled, but she screenshotted it and sent it to herself before replacing the phone. Next day, she tested his lie. Over breakfast, she casually mentioned the bar receipt. "You don't like cocktails, right? So why the bill?" Maksym choked on his coffee, eyes narrowing. "What bill? You digging through trash now?" His voice was sharp, almost hostile. She smiled, like it was a joke, but saw his hands shake. "Just curious," she said, and he quickly changed the subject, muttering about work. His aggression was new, and it only stoked her fire. Marta installed a tracking app on his phone, simple, one he'd likely miss. That evening, he said he was meeting a client, but the app showed him at that same bar. She didn't follow, not yet. Instead, she checked their joint account and found another transfer, $75 for services. Her money, again. This was her third act of revenge. She moved more savings to her secret account and updated the banking app's passwords. Maksym wouldn't notice right away. He never checked finances, assuming it was her job. She imagined his panic when his card failed at that bar, and the thought warmed her. But she knew a financial hit was just the start. Therefore, she resolved to track him, gather more evidence to make his lies undeniable. Marta woke each morning feeling like her soul was wrapped in barbed wire. But it didn't choke her, it hardened her. Every day with Maksym was a game. She smiled, cooked dinner, but her eyes tracked him like a hawk. The tracking app showed he went to the same house in another district every night. She knew it wasn't clients or meetings. It was Vira, and each new lie sharpened her resolve. That evening, he came home late, reeking of alcohol and that sweet perfume. "Got caught up with the guys," he said, but his eyes dodged hers. Marta nodded, and when he reached for her, she didn't pull away. She wanted to test him. Would he be the same, or had his lies changed even this? He shoved her against the wall, hands clamping her wrists, lips scorching her neck with a force that left marks. She matched him, nails tearing his shirt, but her mind was cold. She caught his glance at the phone, checking for vibrations. It was proof, he wasn't with her, not really. The sex was quick, rough, like he was purging tension. When he collapsed, Marta stood, skin burning but not from desire. She went to the bathroom, supposedly to wash, but checked his jeans on the floor. In a pocket, a receipt from that bar, dated yesterday. She snapped a photo and added it to her file, now thick with evidence, handkerchief, bracelet, screenshots, statements. Next day, she acted. When he said he was meeting a partner, she followed. The app led her to a house in a quiet district. She parked in shadow, gripping the wheel, and saw him. Maksym stood by the entrance, arms around a tall woman with loose hair. Her laugh cut through, calling him kitten. Marta's insides twisted, but she snapped photos, dozens, capturing every gesture, every touch. Back home, her anger morphed into something new, cold, precise fury. She opened her laptop and found Vira's social media profile using the message number. It was public, photos from parties, upscale restaurants, and, in some, Maksym, his face cropped, but she recognized his watch, jacket, wrist tattoo. She saved every post, every comment where Vira gushed about her man. It was her fourth act of revenge. She sent an anonymous message to Vira's friend, "Vira's seeing a married guy?" She knew gossip would spread, a small victory. That night, Maksym came home oblivious. He tried reconnecting, pulling her to the bedroom. She didn't resist, she led. She shoved him onto the bed, hands pinning his wrists, lips grazing his ear, but it was a game. She caught his nervous glance at the phone, and it fueled her. But she knew photos and gossip weren't enough. Therefore, she decided to crack his defenses, find evidence to shatter his world. Marta woke each morning with a heart chained in steel. But those chains didn't bind, they forged her. She was no longer the Marta who trusted Maksym's words. Every look, every move was a puzzle piece she assembled to see his betrayal's full shape. The photos from Vira's house burned in her phone, but they weren't enough. She wanted everything, how long, why, and how far he'd gone in his lies. She started small. While he slept, she checked his car. In the glove box, a half-used pack of condoms, though they hadn't used them in years. Her stomach nodded, but she photographed it and put it back. That day, she noticed he'd changed his laptop password, but she knew his patterns. She tried his mother's birthday, it worked. The browser history showed searches, apartments for rent, flower delivery, how to tell your wife. She screenshotted them, her anger sharpening like a blade. That evening, Maksym came home with roses, as if sensing her closing in. "For you," he said, his smile so fake it nearly made her gag. She set the flowers in a vase, but when he pulled her close, she didn't push away. She wanted to see how far he'd go in this charade. He shoved her against the wall, hands ripping her dress, lips bruising her neck. She matched him, nails clawing his back, but it wasn't passion, it was war. She bit his shoulder, but her eyes locked on his phone on the table. He hadn't turned it off, and when he slumped back, panting, she grabbed it, pretending to check the time. She saw a notification from V, "You promised tonight." Marta set the phone down, heart racing. In the bathroom, she checked his shirt, lipstick on the collar, not her shade. She photographed it and added it to her file, now brimming with proof. Next day, she asked a bank-employed friend to trace Maksym's transactions. He'd been sending $100 regularly to Vira Petrenko's account. Her name was real now, and it made Marta's hatred crystal clear. She struck softly but painfully. She sent an anonymous message to his colleagues' group chat, "Anyone seen Maksym with Vira Petrenko at the bar?" Gossip would reach him, and he'd panic, her fifth act of revenge. He came home furious, accusing her of snooping, but she smiled, saying, "I'm just looking out for us." Her calm rattled him, a small triumph. She let him close again that night, but she set the rules. In the bedroom, she pushed him onto the bed, hands gripping his wrists, lips teasing his ear, but it was control. She saw his nervous glance at the phone, and it drove her. But she knew gossip and screenshots were mere sparks. Therefore, she resolved to hack his cloud, find messages to expose the depth of his betrayal. Marta no longer felt like a victim. Each new piece, condoms, transfers, lipstick, built her armor. She knew Maksym and Vira laughed behind her back, but she was preparing a blow they wouldn't see. Her file swelled, screenshots, photos, receipts, records. But she needed one final piece, something to obliterate his lies for good. She waited until Maksym slept, then took his old tablet, and used for months. She knew he kept old files there, hoping for traces. The password was their wedding date, ironic. In the cloud, she found a folder labeled personal. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Messages with Vira, dozens, where he called Marta boring, stuck, promising Vira a new life. But the worst was a video. Their kitchen, that same table from a week ago. Vira sat on it, dress hiked, Maksym between her legs. Their laughter cut Marta like a knife, but she forced herself to watch. Vira whispered, "Your wife doesn't even know how pathetic she is." Marta copied the video, messages, everything. Her rage was ice cold. She recalled yesterday, when Maksym came home and pulled her to the bedroom. His hands tore her clothes, shoving her onto the bed, breath hot as he muttered her name. She'd responded, nails marking his back, but knew he wasn't with her. He was thinking of Vira, their secret meets, her laugh in that video. It was a humiliation she wouldn't forgive. She struck immediately. She sent Vira an anonymous snippet where Maksym called her temporary, knowing it had sparked out her sixth act of revenge. Maksym came home livid, likely after Vira's tantrum. He accused Marta of spying, but she smiled, "I'm just caring for us." Her calm unnerved him, another win. She let him near that evening, but she dictated. She pushed him against the wall, hands gripping his neck, lips biting his, but it wasn't desire, it was power. She saw his nerves, his eyes darting to the phone. She knew he feared exposure, and it fueled her. But she understood one video wasn't enough for total ruin. Therefore, she decided to gather formal proof to crush him in court and before everyone he knew. Marta felt no more pain, her heart was steel. The video of Vira on their kitchen table was the final blow, but it didn't break her. It gave her strength. She knew Maksym and Vira had used her, her money, her home, her trust. But now she was no victim, but a hunter. Her file was ready, messages, photos, videos, statements. She hired a lawyer to check their joint finances and learned Maksym had funneled $200 to Vira over 6 months. Her money, earned through her sweat. She didn't make a scene. Instead, she opened a secret account and moved her savings, changing all passwords. Maksym didn't notice, he never cared about finances, assuming it was her thing. This was her 7th act of revenge, cutting him off from resources he thought were his. She also contacted a private detective, who confirmed their affair with photos from hotels and bars. These were for court, but she planned more. She let Maksym think he was in control. One evening, he came home with wine, aiming to fix things. She played along, but she directed. She pulled him to the bedroom, hands tearing his shirt, lips whispering his name, but she owned every move. She shoved him onto the bed, nails grazing his chest, but her eyes tracked his reaction. He was tense, glancing at the phone, fearing Vira's messages. It was a small victory, making him nervous even in her arms. Next day, she met the lawyer, who drafted a divorce suit and alimony claim. She also had him check Maksym's transfers, some tied to their joint business, likely illegal. This was her 8th act of revenge, preparing a financial hit to leave him with nothing. She pictured his panic when his accounts froze, and it warmed her. She planned the final strike. She compiled all evidence into a digital folder and drafted emails, one for Maksym, one for Vira, one for his colleagues and friends. She knew public exposure would ruin his reputation, but she wanted him to feel the shame she had. She also sent Vira's friend an anonymous clip of Vira mocking the pathetic wife, knowing it'd stir trouble. But she knew an emotional hit was only part. Therefore, she prepared court documents to reclaim all he'd stolen and make him pay for life. Marta stood before the mirror, adjusting her dress. Today, she'd end it. Her evidence file was complete, her account secure, her lawsuit filed. Maksym thought he held the reins, but he was wrong. She invited him to dinner at home, saying she wanted to talk about the future. He arrived, smug, with a cheap bottle of wine, believing she'd forgive again. But Marta was no longer that woman. She poured him wine, her movements calm, though inside she burned. She turned on the TV, and a slideshow began, his messages with Vira, calling Marta boring, photos from bars, hotels, the video of Vira laughing on their kitchen table. Maksym paled, his glass shaking. "What the hell is this?" he croaked, voice breaking. "The truth," she said, her tone cold as steel. "Thought I was blind? Pathetic?" He tried to deflect, muttering about mistakes, but she tossed him a folder, divorce papers and financial statements showing the $200 he'd sent Vira. "Sign, or this goes to your mom, your clients, your boss," she said, eyes blazing. Maksym shouted, blaming her, but she smiled. She knew he'd lost. This was her 9th act of revenge, making him feel the helplessness he'd forced on her for years. Next day, she sent Vira a zip file with proof. He stole from me to fund your whims. Check his account, it's empty. She knew Vira would unleash hell on him, her 10th act of revenge. She also sent the video to his colleagues' chat. This your trusty manager? Gossip spread in hours, and his boss fired him. She filed a lawsuit, demanding every dollar he'd funneled to Vira, plus damages. The court froze his accounts, leaving him with nothing, no home, no car, no job. Her 11th act. She mailed his mother the evidence, knowing he feared her judgment. 12th act. To Vira, she sent an anonymous note from a friend, hinting Maksym cheated on her too. 13th act, breaking their bond. Marta sold their flat, took her share, and bought a ticket to Barcelona, enrolling in a design course, a dream he'd mocked. At his last court appearance, he begged her not to ruin his life. She smiled, her gaze icy. Back home, where his cologne no longer lingered, she felt freedom. On the plane, she opened her laptop and deleted his number, photos, traces. She'd left behind not just his lies, but her old self.